As we all know, the Democratic Party is extremely politically ineffective in the sense that, despite the fact that the Republican Party defines itself by being against good things and for bad things, and the Democratic Party defines itself by being largely in favor of good things but slow and ineffectual. This feels like it should be a slam dunk electorally. Like it really shouldn't be much room for disagreement. We keep finding these little ways the Democratic Party makes itself, you know, um, evidently incompetent. And I saw some discourse on Twitter about this particular bit of incompetence a couple days ago, so I thought I'd talk about it. Democrats spend millions on Republican primaries. Now, this in and of itself is not that exceptional. When we're talking Republican primaries, that is to say, battles between Republicans on who will come out on top and face a Democrat in the general, the idea of Democrats sowing dissent and causing trouble by, picking the wrong guy, it's not entirely unheard of. There are examples of instances where a candidate will be less popular within a party, but potentially more popular outside of their party, and vice versa. So a good example of this might be like Bernie Sanders, right? Bernie Sanders, in my opinion, has a much better ability to pull in independents and potentially even some Republicans than Biden did. But Biden ended up dominating Bernie in the primary because he was stronger within the party, potentially not as strong outside of the party. Trump had a similar effect. You often see these battles between more or less extreme candidates, populists versus institutionalists, so on. Political groups and nonprofits aligned with the Dems have spent nearly $44 million on advertising campaigns across 5 states' Republican primaries to boost the profile of far-right candidates in California, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and Maryland. So essentially, this article is about how they're supporting the far right because they think the far right will be easier to defeat in the general. So they think that if you have like a purple district where there's a potential for Dems or the GOP to win, that if you get the crazy Republican to win in the primary, they'll be easier to beat in the general. It worked great with Trump, right? So yeah, here, hold your horses. Democrats' strategy is rooted in the belief that these candidates, many of whom spread unfounded claims the 2020 election was stolen from former President Donald Trump, will be easier to defeat in a general election. Democratic spending has helped secure Republican nominations and candidates for Illinois and Pennsylvania. To skip on Doodle a little bit down here, ads purchased by Pritzker, that's a Democrat-aligned ad, spending block. Allies attacked the more moderate Aurora Mayor Richard Irvin in the Republican primary and drew attention to the more far-right candidate, State Senator Darren Bailey. Pritzker's ad buy for the primary was more than triple what Bailey raised for his own campaign. So these Democrats spent 3 times what this far-right guy was able to spend himself on ads. Bailey, that's the crazy, who was endorsed by Trump, rose to prominence in Illinois politics when he co-sponsored a bill that proposed allowing rural Illinois to separate from Chicago and form a new Illinois state. After a 2019 state legislative session over a bill guaranteeing Illinois residents abortion rights, which Bailey vehemently opposed, he criticized a fellow lawmaker for having, quote, the gall to bring up the separation of church and state. Painted on the door of his campaign bus is the Bible verse, Ephesians 6:10-19, which calls for followers to wear God's armor in a battle against evil rulers. So the Democrat group spent triple what they could raise. Bailey won the nomination with 55.2% of the vote. Although Irvin was leading Bailey in polls as late as May, he came in second with only 18.6% of the vote. So let's talk about this. Yeah, okay. So the problem here is that when you do this, you move the Republican constituency in that area further to the right. The effect of those ad buys is to get moderate Republicans to support far-right candidates, which means that the Democrats are literally creating the opposition to democracy. See, Democrats and liberals in general don't understand basic, realpolitik, the way Republicans and fascists generally tend to. Liberals are unique in this respect, by the way. A unique defect in their brains that prevents them from understanding this. But the Democrat, this is not new. The Clinton campaign did this back then. This is a long-standing tactic, but right now we're on the precipice of democracy in this country being overturned. We're right now seeing, like, we're at the twilight. I mean, the sun is setting, and they're still doing this. Our only hope for moving the Republicans, not the party, but the voters, away from the insane path that they've been sent on through people like the individuals the Democrats are buying ads for, is to keep them from going that far right. You want them to be moderate because moderates can potentially be swayed. The Democrats are thinning the pool of moderates in the GOP by pulling more people over to the far right in the inept belief that being extreme will make it easier for them to be beaten in the general. Like that worked in 2016. I mean, really think about this here. We're not just talking about, like, the short-term potential of getting an easier win against an extremist. We're talking about the long-term fact that when you prompt Republican voters in an area to vote for an extremist candidate, you are exposing them to an entry point in a cycle that will lead to them supporting the extremist candidates forever. Like, what do you think happens after you get the Republicans in a given district to vote for the crazy, let's separate Illinois from Chicago, put on God's army to battle evil, church and state should be unionized, brought together? If somebody votes for those folks, who do you think they're going to vote for in 2024? You think they're going to go back to being moderate? Like, do you think they're going to like, oh yeah, it didn't work that one time. The Democrats maybe got like an edge win over an extremist candidate that we backed and we wholeheartedly supported. We're just going to go back to like neocon tier shit? What do they think is going to happen? This is a bad take, Vosh. You don't understand the difference between primary voters and general voters. Primary voters are going to be more extreme. In that primary, the purpose of the ad buys is to move people who are going to vote in the general as well. Nobody votes in the primary, then doesn't vote in the general. That's insane. Maybe like 5 people, If they were gonna vote for the moderate candidate, but they are then convinced to vote for the far-right candidate, you have now entrenched far-right beliefs in the mind of that constituency. Democrats don't understand this because Democrats don't believe in ideology. To the liberal, there is no such thing as ideology. That's why they seem to think that things will always work out in their favor no matter what happens. They believe smugly in a kind of interminate status quo, an infinite ideology-free rule of law that can only be challenged by extremists, and even then only temporarily. That we are at the end of history, and people don't actually really believe anything. These are just battles over marginal disagreements over facts of the matter, very basic. That's why, liberals like Biden are always playing at this bipartisan bullshit, this work together bullshit. Republicans are screaming right now, we will not work with you. We are fully unhinged. We don't care about democracy. We don't care about politics outside of the acquisition of more power. And Democrats are like, okay, well, yeah, but you can't like be mean, and because that's like wrong. And also, like, we would be able to work together if we could just agree on simple common sense issues. Republicans voted, almost to a man, against kicking Nazis out of the military. Republicans voted against federal protection for contraception. Republicans voted against federal protection for abortion. These are not simple disagreements. These are fundamental, like axiomatic challenges to democracy and equal representation. And Democrats are hastening the process. They're doing accelerationism for the other team. That's literally what this is. They're trading the potential for short-term electoral loss on the behalf of the Republican Party for long-term ideological spread of fascism amidst their constituency. Like,
Richard Irvin's real record on crime? For 15 years, Irvin has been a defense lawyer, profiting by defending some of the most violent and heinous criminals. Domestic abusers and sexual assault. A kidnapper who molested a child. Reckless homicide. Even accused child pornographers. Irvin's been getting rich by putting violent criminals back on our streets. Tell Richard Irvin to stop pretending to be tough on crime and start supporting policies that keep people safe.
That was the attack ad against the more moderate candidate. First of all, if you're a defense attorney, it's your job. Like, the Constitution gives everyone a legal right to have their day in court. That's the point of a defense attorney. First of all, yeah. Second of all, that's the attack ad that they made against the moderate Republican. And did that not just sound like a Republican attack? Like, defense attorneys doing their job, soft on crime, you know? Like, it's literally the job of defense attorney. Like, yeah, it's like criticizing a firefighter for fighting fires. It's the thing they do. What else can you do? That's only one of them. In Pennsylvania's race for governor, Democratic gubernatorial candidate and state attorney general Josh Shapiro, not the one you know, dropped nearly 1 million on TV ads highlighting the stances of Republican gubernatorial candidate and state senator Doug Mastriano, more than double what Mastriano spent on his own ad buys. Shapiro's ads call Mastriano, whose campaign bussed rallygoers to the Capitol the day of the Jan 6 riots and has been subpoenaed by the Jan 6 committee, one of Trump's strongest soldiers, and highlight his belief that the 2020 presidential election was stolen. I'm going to have to send him a thank you card, Mastriano told a local news outlet after saying Shapiro's ads. I'm going to have to send him a thank you card, the Jan 6 warrior told a local news outlet after seeing Shapiro's ads. And hey, guess what? Mastriano won his primary with 43.8% of the vote, beating out the more moderate second-place vote-getter, former U.S. Representative Lou Barletta, by more than 23 points. Mastriano, if elected in November, would have the power to appoint Pennsylvania's next Secretary of State, a crucial office that would oversee how Penn's federal elections are managed and certified. What am I supposed to say here? Like legitimately, I don't know what to add to this, like politically, like in terms of analysis. Like, what? Yeah, like there it is. Even if all of these far-right candidates lose as a product of this meddling, you have still moved over tens or possibly hundreds of thousands of Republicans to the far right. That's what you're doing. That's the purpose of advertising on their behalf. You're getting them to vote for ultra-far-right candidates, thus increasing the likelihood that they will adopt ultra-far-right talking points. Even the best-case scenario here is incredibly destructive. In California and Colorado, Democrats spent millions in several Republican primaries in order to try and elevate more radical right-wing candidates. In these instances, Democratic efforts did not succeed. In California's 22nd Congressional District, a toss-up district in the Central Valley, Democrats spent over $110K on political ads to elevate election denier Chris Matthis over his opponent, Rep. David Valadao, one of the few Republicans who voted to impeach Trump in January 2020. Oh, great. Cool. Hey, who do we want to lose? Who do we want to promote a fascist over? Like the one guy. David Valadao claims he's Republican, yet Valadao voted to impeach President Trump, said the narrator in the ad paid for by House Majority PAC, a super PAC aligned with House Democrat leadership and Nancy Pelosi. This is from Dems. This is the messaging that Democrats are spending money on. That real Republicans are the ones who stand by Trump no matter what. Mathis told Open Secrets, "We have never communicated with the Pelosi-linked super PAC and had no involvement in their campaign against Congressman Valadao." Didn't even have to ask. Dems will just, of their own volition, you know, Dems will just, CA22 is +6 for Republicans. How would this shift voters to the far right? What? Because even if a district is majority Republicans, there is a meaningful difference between them electing status quo rhino neocons and election-denying lunatic QAnon open fascists. Like, yeah, in the past, haven't you said the further right the Republicans go, that's good for us because more Americans will break to us? Rodzilla, you don't understand. The purpose of these ad buys is to prevent Republicans from breaking. They are producing the agitprop, the manufactured consent to convince Americans to be on board with the movement to the far right. They are spending money, launder people's opinions, and push them in that direction. This isn't just like an organic reaction to existing like material influence. They're spending money to deliberately do this.
Same label.
Why not?
So Republicans got to check the ingredients. David Valadao claims he's Republican. Yet, David Valadao voted to impeach President Trump. Yeah, Valadao voted to impeach Trump. And Republican Chris Matisse, a true conservative, 100% pro-Trump and proud. Pro-Trump Republican Chris Matisse, military veteran, local businessman. Or politician David Valadao, who voted to impeach Trump. Republicans, it's time to decide. House Majority PAC is responsible for the content of this act.
Courtesy of House Majority PAC, the Democrat PAC. Thank you. You know why they're doing this? Because liberals still think that this is a joke. It's the exact same as when they provided a ton of free ad time for Trump back in 2015 and 2016. They still think it's the exact same thing. They're delusional. They don't actually believe in ideology. They don't actually think that this can lead to people going that crazy. What they think right now is like this is like a funny, like lay epic prank troll where they're getting people to accidentally support the unelectable candidate, not realizing that unelectable candidates become electable when the people vote for them, and people will vote for candidates that ads play for. That like is like, oh, he's unelectable. Well, you're making him electable. You're constructing the electability. No, yeah, it's exactly the same thing as like the give crazy people the mic. Like, dude, give Trump the mic. He's so crazy. He'll make himself look bad. We won't even have to run against him. And then we got 4 years of Trump. They don't understand how politics works. Fundamentally, liberals, it's brain damage. They do not understand. Despite House Majority PAC's efforts, Valada won 25.6% of the vote in the June 8 primaries, and Matisse won 23.1%. Oh, thank God. The insane lunatic QAnon Jan 6 whatever guy marginally lost, and the Republican who was willing to impeach Trump marginally won. Fantastic. So the only product of this ad was that thousands of Californian Republicans were exposed to ad rolls that made them more far-right. That's it. The literal only outcome was less money in the hands of Democrats and more Republicans are far-right now. That's it. That's the only thing that changed. We did it. We exchanged money for more fascists. We did it. Good job. In Colorado, a similar story has unfolded, albeit with significantly more funding. The Colorado Sun reported Dems spent nearly $7 million to elevate more far-right Republican candidates running for governor, U.S. Senate to represent the 8th candidate, $4 million more than Republicans spent on their own primaries. They were spending it to try to elevate Ron Hank's conservative credentials over Joe O'Dea in the Colorado U.S. Senate race. Hanks, the far-right one they spent millions supporting, has voiced his belief that 2020 presidential election was stolen from Trump, and he was one of several lawmakers to attend the Jan 6 rally that preceded the U.S. Capitol riot. Despite these ads, O'Dea beat Hanks in the primary, winning by 9 percentage points. Thank God. So all they did was spend $4 million and move people further to fascism. No actual election result was changed. We just have less money and there are more fascists. Nicely done. In the state's gubernatorial primary, Democratic-aligned PAC, Colorado Information Network, and liberal nonprofit Progress Now, oh, we're going to get some progress, Colorado dropped almost $2 million to bolster the profile of former Parker Mayor Greg Lopez over his candidate Heidi Ganal Lopez. Same last name? That might be confusing. Okay. Similar to other candidates on the Democrats' funding list, Lopez believes the 2020 presidential election was stolen from Trump, and then Ganal won by 7 points. Money spent, more fascists. Yeah, I missed the period in there. Yeah. Ganal is the last name, not the middle name. Oh, I missed the period. I'm sorry. That is a very small period. Okay, yeah. Did I have my mouse over it, maybe? It's pretty small over there. Lastly, in the Republican primary for Colorado's 8th District, House Majority PAC and Democrat-aligned PACs dropped nearly $350,000. On TV and digital ads, boosting Lori Sane, blah, blah, blah. Right, yes, finished third. Long-term consequences for Democratic strategy loom. Well, that's what I've spent the whole time talking about, so you can kind of imagine. You know what? Just to show that this isn't some crazy lefty conspiracy theory for any, I don't know, liberals or DGers or whatever watching, some Democratic Party operatives have criticized the strategy. I think it's very dangerous and potentially very risky to elevate people who are hostile to democracy, Democratic political strategist Howard Wolfson told the Washington Post. Either this is a crisis moment or isn't, and if it is, which it is, you don't play cute in a crisis. Thanks. Thank you, Democratic political strategist. I guess you're the guy who they don't call. Like they have like a team of monkeys that and this guy on the political strategist team, and like this guy gets the fewest calls back because he's less fun at parties. They actually reject people like this for being too unrealistic and too far left. Liberals don't believe in ideology. They don't believe. They can't fathom a world where people's minds are changed by words, which is why Biden doesn't try. Which is why they don't try ever. The only people in the Democratic Party who actually like throw up a muck about trying to move people over to their positions are the progressives. Like moderate liberal Democrats don't. They don't like they're not proselytizers for their positions. They don't do it. All they'll do is say, I've done things and I can do things better. They never convince you of the rightness of anything because they believe smugly, again, that there's no such thing as ideology. That everyone already believes that certain things are good, and it's just a matter of like hashing out the details on practical outcomes and how to achieve what everyone already wants. They don't believe in ideology. You understand what I'm talking about, right? Do you all understand ideologically speaking how this ties into the end of history and why this is a very dangerous misconception? The biggest weakness of the Democratic Party is the fact that they do believe it's the end of history. And as a product of that, they don't make an effort to change things. How can things be changed? It's the end of history. They don't make an effort to change people's minds. No radical action can be taken, and there's no action more radical than believing that what the people want is subject almost entirely to the whims and the propaganda delivered by people in power. That is a truly radical sentiment. Because how can we live at the end of history if the citizens in America are still capable of having their fundamental beliefs changed? We can't. But they do believe we are at the end of history. So as a product of that, they're doomer? No, they're the opposite of doomer. They don't think there's anything to doomer about. They think that everything that is good is already built in stone. Like everything that can be done, every fundamental thing is set. What they are is blind. They're not doomer, they're blind. They're incapable of looking beyond. Yeah. It is a very fragile kind of optimism, yeah. Not the apocalyptic. Oh yeah, to be clear, the end of history is a term that refers not to the apocalypse or the end times, but rather towards like the plateau that you reach. Like history is like a slope that eventually crescendos into interminable, like history can no longer happen, like everything is set. The term end of history entered discourse back in the 1990s after the Cold War, the Clinton administration, you know, America's economy was booming, communism was gone. And people in America, not people all around the world, mind you, because all around the world revolutions continue to happen. People continue to be brought to death camps, slaughtered, dumped in mass graves, revolutions, political upheavals. But in America, you know, we thought arrogantly, with more arrogance than is possible, more arrogance than any. It's literally the most arrogant possible thing you can believe. It's the apex of arrogance. Believe that they had reached like the top. You know, like there you go. Like we did it. The Cold War is over. Capitalism won. Liberal democracy and capitalism are just going to continue sailing the waters of time forever. And even if liberals don't exactly believe that, they still act as though it's true. You know? Because if they didn't believe that was true, they would make an effort to convince people that their moral positions are good. But they don't. So funny rhetorician. I think, honest to God, like, I think a better strategy, like, if you have millions of dollars to spend on ad buys, spend it in the general on your candidates and actually do a good job, you know? I really genuinely feel like if it weren't for the fact that the the Democratic Party is like Rock Lee, except really weak, so all the weighted bracers mean that he can't move at all. And all he would have to do is remove the bracers and he could hop around a bit, you know? And the bracers are being stupid. Like, all the Democrats need to do is take off the dumb shit arm wrap and the dipshit bracer and the like dumb ankle wrap and like drop it all on the ground and make the craters appear, you know? And then they could like do normal political things like not suck shit. Like they could make a basic effort at arguing the validity of their positions, assuming the people they're talking to disagree with them. Isn't it interesting how Republicans are constantly finding ways at pulling people into their ideology who might not already agree with them, but liberals arrogantly only defer to shared beliefs that they assume everyone already subscribes to? When Republicans want to bring a bunch of people over, they invent culture war discourse that might catch people in at any point. You can be liberal, but if you have an issue with feminists, oh boy, are there internet pipelines for you to fall down and end up a fascist. Do you have issues with, like, gaming culture? Oh boy, are there pipelines for you. Do you, like, literally anything? Do you think, like, are you not, like, anti-trans, but you think there's, like, some weird stuff on pronouns? Oh boy, give it a week and a half and you're going to be a fascist. Incel stuff, anything involving depression, alienation, oh boy, are there pipelines to move you over to the far right, you know? And what do liberals do with their time? Like, what are liberal strategists doing? All they do when it comes to, like, celebrating and pushing for the validity of their own positions is nothing. They treat them as self-evident. Have you ever heard a Democratic politician make an argument for diversity as a concept that wasn't either self-referential or a repeat of, like, the same basic bumper sticker phrases that you would hear, like, it makes us stronger or whatever? Because I don't think I ever have. I've heard it from progressives, you know? I've heard it from lots of people. Have you ever heard a Democratic politician make an impassioned plea to people who feel alienated by the current economy? Isn't it really interesting how the most Democrats can manage is say that, like, things are unfair for the worker right now and we're going to make it better with this gas tax reduction or whatever. And Republicans, even though they lie about the solutions, are able to point out the fact that we live in a fundamentally inequitable and broken system. Like they do, don't they? Donald Trump, you know, he lied about it. Every word he spoke, he lied. But when Republicans, when they say the economy is screwed, you know, people are crammed into cities, these cities are unlivable, they're speaking to experiences that people have actually had. When Republicans point out there's a ton of corruption in D.C., it's true. It's not just Democrats who are corrupt. It's true. Will Democrats acknowledge there's corruption in D.C.? Very rarely. Democrats they have blinders on. They operate blindly. They just appeal to people who already agree with their precepts. Republicans go out there and actively attempt to reach people where they are and then lie to them to bring them over to their side. The only reason the Republican Party is where it is right now is because liberalism is, at least in terms of political efficacy, disordered. It is non-functional. If Democrats were capable of competent political organizing, even without changing anything about the basic principles of the party, they would be dominating this country. It would be like 36 blue states to 14 red states, and we would have uncontested majorities in both houses of Congress. Like, it wouldn't even be close. But Democrats can't do these things. They can't do it. They don't know how to do political messaging because liberals don't understand real politics, and fascists do. Yeah, they're allergic to being strong. They can't be strong. Do you think it's deliberate? It might be for some people. I will say, though, maybe this makes me less cynical. I actually believe a lot of it's not. I would say the vast majority of it is that it's not. I think that this is just how liberals are. Talk to a liberal. I think this is how liberals are. Not only is this like a bias towards liberal behavior, but also most of the people in the Democrat Party are like 500 years old. Like the average age of a representative is higher, 10 or so years higher for Dems than the GOP in Senate and Congress. So you have not only liberals, but you have liberals whose like apex of political power would have been decades ago. Like they would have reached the crescendo of their influence back in an era where real politics was less important because people did believe in the end of history and neocons were still the predominant right-leaning faction. I think a lot of it is just it's just their brains. It's their bias. It's their disposition. Are progressives different from liberals? Economically and ideologically, progressives and liberals have a ton of overlap, but politically, I do distinguish liberals from progressives in America, at least, because I do think there's a critical difference between people like AOC and people like Nancy Pelosi. Even though they would both be liberals in a Marxist framework, the like way they approach these issues is massively different. Think of a progressive as like a liberal epitomized, you know? Think of a progressive. Yeah, AOC might be a crypto socialist, but you know what I'm talking about. Think of it as the liberal epitomized. A progressive is somebody who stands for liberal values, equality, fraternity, blah blah, you know, but has the political wherewithal to meaningfully push for it, you know, to overcome. Yeah, John Oliver is a progressive, yeah. So I make that distinction. I think I make that distinction there. Yes, West Wing is the cause of the death. No, I've seen Funny Rhetorician. in terms of the upcoming stuff. But none of this has anything to do, in my opinion, with the Democrats sowing the seeds for the removal of democracy. Because Democrats don't believe democracy can end. If history is over, then it must necessarily be the case that the institutions that this country was built upon cannot be changed, you know? Democrats firmly believe this. And I won't change my mind unless the DOJ does a proper mass arrest. A good and proper mass arrest. There has been a trend in the past, week? 2 weeks? Thankfully, 538's right here. See, back here, up until November 14th, 2021, I mean, thereabouts, you know, Dems were polling higher for congressional issues. Republicans have held the lead since then, but they've been closing together, see, in the past week or so. This is a very marginal gain, but if the trend continues, it could be very positive. We'll have to see. Yeah, it's pretty close. Pretty embarrassing that Democrats are better on basically every issue empirically, and this is the state of things. You'd have to be pretty bad at messaging for Republicans to be, like, evil and incompetent, and Democrats to be only incompetent. And this is where we're at. You know, the average American's life gets meaningfully better under Democrats, reliably. Nothing Trump ever did even came close to, like, Joe Biden cutting child poverty in half with them tax credits. I mean, even that helped a lot of people. That's not enough to satisfy me, you know, but if that Build Back Better plan could go through, which it can't, of course, because Joe Manchin, and it's embarrassing. What can the average progressive do to get a win in 2022? What do you mean the average progressive? I don't think the average progressive is running for Congress. Hell yeah, Kieran. What do I tell leftists who still say having Trump for 4 years was a better outcome than 4 years of Hillary? Find a large object, you know, like with like a handle that you could hold, something that you could bludgeon them with, something like that. You know, that's pretty much where we're at the moment. They're lost. The only hope for them is catastrophic, amnesia-inducing brain damage. Only that can set them on a proper road in Roblox. Joe Biden popularity numbers. Now that's damn impressive, Joe. Just a quick reminder that, as is always the case, I've been completely right. I called it. Joe Biden, if he wins, will not be able to solve the problems this country faces. His popularity will plummet, and the dialectic will advance. Look at Joe Biden popularity within the Democrat Party. Yeah. Does it separate that here? That might be somewhere else. Oh, I thought that would go 4 years back. Okay. It just sucks that people are turning to fascism instead of communism. Well, life is rough. Why do you think libs will be radicalized by Biden's failures? Listen, my friend, there are no guarantees here, okay? All I know is that the likelihood of Democrats moving left increases when they see moderate liberals failing. It would be better if Manchin cinema weren't an issue. It would be better if, like, Joe Biden was less restricted, because then more of the failings could be attributed purely to his ineffectual tendencies. But, yeah, what you really want is you want Joe Biden to die of COVID so Kamala becomes president, and then she's despised by everyone, naturally. And then, you know, the dialectic advances even faster. I don't want her to be president, though. I don't want it. I don't want that. I don't want that. Nope. I give you $50 to bet who becomes GOP nominee, Trump or DeSantis. The only reason I'm not confident about Trump is because of his health. If Trump remains healthy through to 2024, I think it's going to be him. DeSantis makes more sense, but, like, I don't think that DeSantis has Trump's star power. Something might change there, but that's my opinion.